Greetings, J2B L283 relatives or enthusiasts, people interested in the research of where our lineages came from. Um, I wanted to talk about the current state of the research at a very high level. If anyone tells you that you'll never know where your ancestor had been living more than 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, they're just wrong. We have found ancient samples in the last 1 or 2 years. So many ancient samples have been found. And so for a lot of men who are who are the closest relatives of these ancient samples, these men know that their ancestor probably were living among various tribes of Iron Age Europe. For example, there's um, men with the surname Dawson that are J2BL283 from Virginia. They are the closest relatives of an ancient sample in our haplogroup that was in Etruria, so in Etruscan from 6 or 700 BCE. Civita Vecchia, that sample. So these guys and their closest relatives, their next closest relatives are all Italians. So this line was living in Italy, more specifically in Etruria, during the Iron Age. And then there's also been samples found, many samples found dating to Bronze Age and Iron Age on the Adriatic coast of the Western Balkans, just all up and down that coast. Um, and one of these lineages is uh, has geography that's the same as a tribe called the Iapides or Iapodes. So there's a lot of living guys today, some from the same area of Croatia, and others from much different geography, like guys from Germany, and even people from Ukraine are descended from men that most likely lived in the area where the Iapodes were living, which let me zoom in because I'm not that familiar with the geography here. Is it these guys? Yes, it's these guys. These samples. So they're just above these mountains along the coast of Croatia here. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about, oh, hide that. Now I want to talk about what we know and what we don't know. And I'm going to start at the oldest that we care about when we're talking about J2B L283. So 10,000 years ago, our pre J2B L283 ancestor was probably living somewhere between the Caucasus and the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. The evidence for this is the oldest ancient samples of J2B are from a cave in Georgia in Imereti and in Tepe Abdul Hossein in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. And then there's also another sample that's not quite as old as those two that is also in western Iran. So, so this is the likely deeper origin of where J2B L283 eventually came from. So what we don't know is the exact route and timing of how the L283 line migrated away from that origin J2B core origin area. We don't know exactly when and by what route that this ancestor migrated to Europe. But it looks like if I zoom in here, there There is a corridor going through the Caucasus following the Terek River, which the source of the Terek River is the Gergeti Mountain in Georgia near the city Stepantsminda. And this river crosses into Russia, other side of the North Caucasus, into the North Ossetia Alania Republic. And you can see this ancient sample is a J2B L283 basal sample from 1800 BCE. It's found not too far from this system of rivers. So this guy could represent a J2B L283 that had stayed around in this area after some of them had crossed through there. If that is how they got on the other side of the Caucasus Mountains. So I'm just, this is a possibility, is that was how our ancestor came through. This ancient sample, we don't know if this ancient sample is a remnant, or meaning he's kind of indicative of where J2BL283 had been living before migrating to Europe. We don't know if he is a remnant or if he is a back migration, meaning, well, what if J2BL283 ancestor had already migrated to Europe, like the shores of the Black Sea around Romania, Moldova, or Ukraine, and then maybe that guy migrated back to Kabardino-Balkaria. That's also a possibility. There's another piece of circumstantial evidence that we have another basal J2B L283 from Armenia, and he's the only Armenian on the Y-fold tree that is in our haplogroup. So I think that's some circumstantial evidence that I would just assume that this Kabardino-Balkaria sample is a remnant, and because we have two samples that are basal that are from the core area of J2B, and one of them is an ancient sample, so they could just be samples that stayed around that core area. We're waiting on an ancient sample that is from Moldova, and it's not been published yet, but it's supposed to be either J2BL283 fully formed, or maybe he will be pre-J2BL283. We don't know yet, and I think the age is also not certain yet, but it could be Copper Age. But anyway, until that sample is published, then we don't have anything actionable to go on there. Oh crap, just lost my internet. So moving forward, the oldest J2B L283 from Europe, found in Europe itself, and actually just the oldest sample yet found, since we don't have this sample from Moldova yet published, it's this sample in Serbia, but he's really near the border of Hungary, Serbia, and Romania. MOK15, it's about 1900 BCE sample. And because of this sample, we think it makes the most sense that J2B L283 migrated through from east to west, generally from east to west, following some river systems, either Tisa and or Danube, and then some of them established themselves in the Western Balkans, and those are the ones that we found the most Bronze Age and Iron Age samples of so far. So some of the lineages of J2B-L283 established themselves along the Adriatic coast. Those ones became very prolific and surviving to this day. And a lot of them, the survivors today, do not trace their descent to there, because their ancestors had then subsequently migrated to someplace else in Europe, and even in some cases to the Levant, one line. One or two different lines. So the interesting thing that is kind of a new thing for me is that there's a Bronze Age culture that I didn't hear of before, that only in the last year or two uh, there's been more papers written about it. It's called the Cetina culture, or maybe it's pronounced Chetina culture. I don't know, but it's named after type site Cetina, which I think is probably from Croatia. And this is a Bronze Age culture that, on the basis of pottery, I think for the most part, is how they have archaeologists have theorized the spread of this culture that came from the Western Balkans along the Adriatic coast, and during the Bronze and Iron Age, uh, spread to parts of Italy and Sicily. It's mentioned. Sardinia is not mentioned, but we have ancient samples of our haplogroup from Sardinia. And also interesting that I'll just mention in the same breath is we have ancient sample from the Iron Age from Tunisia. And this was a site that was considered, there it is, Kerkouane. I couldn't remember the name of it. This was considered a Phoenician trading emporia, and but we found one of the samples there was the J2BL283, who's not from Phoenicia. We're from Europe. We're from Western Balkans, if you go further back. And so this is interesting. We know that our samples, we know that our ancient, the ancestors of some of our lineages had been living in not only the Western Balkans, but Italy and Sardinia and Tunisia. So it will be interesting. One of the questions that I think would be interesting for us to resolve is, will we find some ancient J2BL283 in Sicily? And if so, how far back will it show that our male line has been living in Sicily? Our ancient samples from Sardinia date to I think 1200 BCE, so that's pretty far back. Uh, Interesting question about the samples from Sardinia that we don't know the answer to yet, but I have a guess, is how did the migration to Sardinia take place? Was it first a migration to mainland Italy, and then they crossed Italy from the Adriatic side, and then once they were on the Tyrrhenian Sea side, did they then go to Sardinia? Or was it a different type of migration that was more seaborne, and just they went to Sardinia through coastal hopping from different sites along the coasts of Italy? And my hunch is that that is probably more likely, because we've seen that our lineage has been found in the Catena culture, which is theorized to spread by sea contact. So those are some interesting questions. Another interesting question is how far, if you look at how far north we find ancient Iron Age or Bronze Age J2BL283. We don't find Iron Age J2BL283 further north than this sample in Western Hungary, and we don't find any further west than Sardinia. But it's possible that we will find some of them, further north and than this sample in Western Hungary, and it's possible that we will find them further west, because we know that there were trade networks that, like, the Phoenicians had a trade network that went all the way to Spain. So if we have ancient age J2BL283 found in a place that was considered important in a Phoenician trade network in Tunisia, then why wouldn't we also maybe find some in Iberia? I think that that's possible to find. Further north, so other interesting questions for J2BL283. There are a number of different J2BL283 lineages found in Poland today. yet we don't make a big percentage of Poles. I guess I should show you the heat map for that. This is heat map. This is the newer version of heat map. I call it heat map alpha, and it has a more accurate calculation of regional distribution. So we're not in high numbers. We are like 2 to 4% of Poles. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see because it's a very translucent shade of green. We don't make up very much of the modern Polish people. But we do have a lot of lines that are there. They're just all really distantly related to one another, and may all have different explanations for how they got there. But it would be interesting to know how they got there. And on a related note, there are two major lineages of J2BL283 that have a lot of living men in them today, which we still don't have any Iron Age sample found for them. And that is my own lineage, J2B Z631. Major child of that is Z1043. We don't have any ancient samples of this line found. And then another line is Y23094. These are lineages that are some of the more prolific lineages of J2BL283, and yet no Iron Age ancient sample yet found. So it would be very interesting to finally learn where did those two lines that are very prolific originate. And the only thing we can say is, well, they probably didn't originate in any places where we have found Iron Age samples whatsoever, because in the places where we have found Iron Age samples and done DNA tests, none of those samples are positive for these two lines that I'm talking about. So we're looking at places outside of the heavily sampled Iron Age locations. So we may be looking. Some of these may be Bosnian, like from the hinterlands of Bosnia, or from Kosovo, or northern Montenegro, or parts of Serbia, or North Macedonia, or even western parts of Bulgaria. Well, I mean, I'm talking about the modern places. These are the modern names. So this is something that I'm really interested in, because that's my line is still unresolved where the origin is. I wrote a recent article about one of my theories that it could have been among the Dardanians. That was a tribe that lived in what is now roughly Kosovo and some parts next to it. In ancient Rome, in ancient Rome in history, they called the area Moesia after they conquered it and incorporated it into Rome. So you can find that article on my website, Phylogeographer. I created a page called J2B L283 Portal. I created this about 2 months ago, and this is where I'm only putting information about J2B L283. So you can just find some interesting links there about new lineages found, background information, links to scientific papers about, for example, the Cetina or Cetina culture, however you pronounce that, and other things. Well, it wouldn't be right to end this video without mentioning Albanians and ancient Illyrians, and what sorts of connections that there may be there, or that there are. Another major line of J2BL283 that does not yet have any Iron Age ancient sample found is the one that has the most Albanians in it, in J2BL283. It's called PH 4679. This is a bronze. It has a Bronze Age ancestor from about 1400 BCE, and if you look, it's got a lot of branching points. And the if you are Albanian and you are J2BL 283, then this is the line that you would be most likely to be positive for. Although there are ethnic Albanians in almost every line of J2BL 283, but this one is the one that has most of them. So it'll be interesting for the questions about, well, where did the Albanian ethnogenesis, where did they come from? I mean, of course, every group of people is always a combination of different groups that met and mixed together. So there's, I mean, it's the answer to that question is going to be, well, people that were living in Albania before, and maybe some people that came from somewhere neighboring that came in, or maybe they were just always there. I mean, maybe by the time when the Albanian ethnic group was identified in writing by historical sources, maybe the ethnogenesis already happened hundreds or thousands of years before that. That's also a possibility. But anyway, when we have an ancient sample in this line, then there's going to be some hard circumstantial evidence. Um, I think linguistic evidence isn't really that useful for specific geographic origins within the Western or Central Balkans, because there's just no written language of these ancient tribes that were living all over. We call them Illyrian tribes because linguists think that they were on a language continuum, and we just use the word Illyrian to describe this group of tribes that were living in the Western Balkans and maybe Central Balkans. I'm not sure. Uh, so yeah, so if we find ancient sample in this line, then we will learn a little bit more about the ethnogenesis of the Albanian people, because, well, we know that a lot of Albanians are positive for this one particular line. Here's this line I was talking about, PH 4679 on heat map, heat map. It shows that in some part of Albania, it looks like it gets to above 7.6% of the people. If you zoom in, you see where the individual samples trace their descent. There are samples from Kosovo in this line, but I think that just the data source that I'm using, which is just what people have indicated where they're from on WiFL, they don't have Kosovo as a separate country, and so a lot of these samples are putting Albania. So there are people from Kosovo in this line too. But anyway, it gives you an idea that this is a line that's found in a lot of Albanians. And because this line all descend from one man that lived about 1400 BCE, and the diversity is very consistently in Albania or in ethnic Albanians from Kosovo, until some kind of ancient samples are found to show a different origin or different possible origin, then I would just assume that this lineage comes from somewhere where the ethnic Albanians are living now. So if you look at the Kingdom of Illyria, which was a confederation of Illyrian tribes, then I think this is mostly Albania, and then I guess parts of coastal Montenegro and Croatia. This line, PH 4679, would probably have the best claim as having originated somewhere within this kingdom, although this genetic line is older than this state, because the genetic line is to 1400 BCE is when the ancestor lived, and then this map is just from, I think, 250 BCE, so some Roman map. With the possible other claimants to ancient Kingdom of Illyria, well, I mean, all the any kind of Iron Age line might have found its way to the Kingdom of Illyria's geography by 250 BCE. But the only another Iron Age sample is in the line Y21878. That's from Kotor, Montenegro. That's somewhere around here. I don't know exactly. Okay, another interesting question that we don't know the answer to is the brother line to PH 4679 that's found in a lot of Albanians. It has a brother line that's found in two ethnic Circassians, and they've indicated their language is Adigre. I think that it's they also can refer to it as Circassian language if they want to. One's from Kabardino-Balkaria and one's from Adigea Republica. And their most recent common ancestor lived 950 years ago. So sometime before 950 years ago, their ancestor migrated to the North Caucasus. In this line, we think that since this is so many branches downstream of exclusively European Bronze Age lines, that it's a migration from the Balkans to the North Caucasus. This is not. We do not think that this was a remnant that has just been in the North Caucasus the whole time. Um, okay, another another very interesting line is there is a line of men that are Tatars and Mokshas, Volga Tatars to be specific, and Mokshas, which is an ethnic group that speaks a Uralic language living around this area. So 1,200 years ago, all we know is that it's a very prolific line of J2B Z1043. It's a very prolific line of J2B Z1043 that ended up becoming Tatars and Mokshas, and they all descend from one man that lived about 1,200 years ago. So this is an interesting question of how did the ancestor of this man come to be come to live in this location. Uh, and another interesting question is there's a lineage of men that are Syrian Christians of India. Here they are. This is just one guy on the Weifel tree. He's from Kerala, but he's a Christian. This is a minority of people living in this area. And he's a Christian of India. Syrian. They call themselves Syrian Christians of India. And his closest male line relatives are people from Lebanon and Syria. Uh, and they descend from one male line ancestor that lived about 900 BCE. So I think that their ancestor may have already been living in Syria by 900 BCE, and then one of these lines descend from the brother that stayed in Syria, and they are Syrian Christians. And then the other line migrated to India and became Syrian Christians of India. That's what I think is the most likely explanation, but it would be great for this to be either confirmed or shown wrong through an ancient sample, if that will ever be found. Okay, so I think these are some of the interesting questions. So I hope that I hope I've explained some things that we think we know fairly well based on circumstantial evidence and ancient samples found, or based on modern distribution. And then I hope that I've showed you that there's still a lot yet to discover. So motivate your matches to advance research by doing WGS tests and have it analyzed on the Y-fold tree. And that's how we advance the research. And then the heat maps will be updated. So I'd like to thank people that have donated to advance the research over the last 1 or 2 years since I've been doing this, because these two men from Hungary, I used donations from people in our haplogroup research community to buy the WGS tests at YSeq for these two Hungarian men, and they both formed a 900-year-old branch that is the first brother branch of Z622. So for a long time, for several years, JL283 only had one child branch, and that was the branch that 99.99% of all L283, J2L2, A283 descend from. Now we have a Hungarian brother to that, and we hope that we'll be able to find a third sample that will split this subclade, and because we want to know, well, how reliable is this geography of Hungary for their ancient origins? It's very likely that that it is reliable, because the oldest sample from Europe, the oldest ancient sample of J2BL283 is from neighboring country. It's from Mokran, Serbia, not far from Hungary. So this line could have been there um, since 5,600 years ago, when it's split from the rest of J2BL283. We will see. If you'd like to help advance the research into J2BL283 origins, you could donate money to me, which I use to buy tests for people in our haplogroup that I have determined uh, upgrading them would advance the research into the origins of particular lines. Generally, I look for Bronze Age lines, uh, and the sample that I have just purchased, WGS4, is in this line, which is FT 144170. There's only 3 guys in this line. One is a Romanian who is a Székely. It's an ethnic group of a Hungarian ethnic group, and he traces his line to Cluj County. And then there's another sibling branch that's a Bavaria, a guy tracing descent to Bavaria, and then a guy from Scotland. And the guy that I've ordered a test for is from Ancona, which is on the Adriatic coast of Italy, and his ancestral surname is Santini. I didn't get the full funding to help this guy pay for his upgrade, but I just ordered it anyway, and hoping that I will get some reimbursement from donations. And then the next guy that I'm going to test is going to be a Sicilian who is Y23094 positive. This is one of the prolific lineages that I was talking about that still has no Iron Age sample yet found. He's from Sicily, and he's negative for every single line of Y23094. So it'll be interesting to see who he's actually most closely related to. He might split some line, or we'll see. One of the reasons why I decided to upgrade this guy next is because another man who traces his male line to Sicily told me that he ordered a big Y, and he's going to then have his sample analyzed on the Y-fold tree. So if we get a second, and he's in Y23094. So if we get a second sample from Sicily that's in Y23094, who doesn't appear related to the other one by STRs, there's a chance that they might form a very old branch that we could assume had migrated to Sicily by a certain date. And depending on the age of such a exclusively found in Sicily branch of Y23094, it could corroborate a Catena culture mediated migration in the Iron Age, or like Bronze Age Iron Age transition. Yeah, you can send me money through my PayPal, which is my email address, hunterproven@gmail.com.